My name is Emma Dorothy Moostoos. I was born in High Prairie Hospital. I was the first one in my family to be born in the hospital. And my parents were James Jacob Moostoos and Emelia Cunningham. My grandfather, Alexander.
Alexander Moostoos.
Yes.
Okay.
And he was married to Sophie Cardinal.
And they had, obviously, a number of children.
Yes, they had 2 daughters and 4 brothers. One was Jean Marie, Jean-Marie. One was Phillip. Then there was my dad, James. And then there was Jerry. And two aunties. One was Melanie Moostoos, and the other one was Flourice.
What's your mom's name?
Emelia Cunningham.
And who are her parents?
Albert and Betsy Cunningham.
Moostoos was the headman for this area when it came to the signing of Treaty 8.
Yeah.
But he was more than just a headman. He was the oldest of the 7 boys, and he was a very good chief, from what I understand. What can you tell me about Moostoos the man?
Moostoos was a very humble man and smart man, and he was a medicine man. He was very, very generous, and people followed him wherever he moved in his time. And when the big flu came in, he went to East Prairie. He was all over, traveling, helping people. And he was a good medicine man. And when the flu came, he helped everyone get better, but the flu got him.
And his wife as well.
Yes. And they were in East Prairie at that time. And my Chief Moostoos did not believe in the residential school. He was totally against it. And my dad was in residential school for a few weeks, and Chief Moostoos got him out of there, and he took him to the trap line, and he helped, and he had my father travel with him in his path.
So, Chief Moostoos
raised my father.
Raised your dad. And as he raised him, he taught him certain values. Let's talk about what those values in your father's day were.
Okay. Humbleness, generosity, truth. My dad lived the 7 teachings. He was a very spiritual man. He didn't go to school. He learned how to hunt. He learned how to survive. He learned how to work. He knew how to respect other people. And my father and my mother had 16 children.
A lot of Indigenous families had very large numbers of children.
Yes.
And I believe that that was part of the resiliency of the Indigenous people of this region, was they had a lot of children to rely on to help gather berries, to go hunting, to get wood, to all of the survival skills.
And they believed that was the purpose of life.
And then the residential schools.
Destroyed it.
What's your experience with the residential schools?
I was in the residential school for 11 years in Joussard. And it was horrible, horrible, horrible at the beginning, because when we started school in the mission, we didn't know how to speak English. We didn't understand English. It was
Completely foreign.
Yeah. So I went to residential school when I was 6 years old. 6, and I turned 7 in November. And I was in there till 11, for 11 years. But I did complete grade 11 there. It was very, very horrible. Too horrible to even talk about. Like, it was unreal, but we had to learn to adjust. And we had to learn to follow rules. We were being, the happiest days of my life was before I went to the mission, because I was able to be me. And they just turned us around to be somebody else. We could not even talk to our siblings. We would get whipped.
Was that because you were speaking Cree or because you were speaking English?
Because we were speaking Cree. Not all of us in our family spoke Cree. We didn't know how to speak English.
How many children in your family were forced into residential school?
All of us.
And then it's your turn to be in residential school. How did that affect your father?
He was very upset, but there was nothing. They even threatened to take him to jail.
If he didn't let you go to school?
Yes, because he took one of my brothers out, because one of my brothers was disabled, and the police threatened to put him in jail. The government threatened to put him in jail.
So let's start with your first day in residential school. How did you get to the school? Did they come and get you by horse and buggy? How did they take you to the school?
They came and got us in a caboose.
With the train?
No, in a vehicle. Caboose.
Okay.
And they put us all in there. And we used to hide. Every time a white person came to the house, we would hide, because they would look. We hid in the cellar, because my mom and dad were afraid they would come and get us, because they didn't understand what. My mom and dad didn't speak English either.
So they round up all of you children and they take you to school. What's your first day like? What happened?
Nothing. Cried and cried and cried, because I didn't even understand. Oh, they made us change our clothes. They gave us other clothes.
So they gave you like a uniform to wear?
Yeah.
And what about your hair?
Cut it.
They cut it off?
Oh yeah, they cut our hair. It was horrible, horrible, horrible.
Do you remember the nuns that ran Joussard? Do you remember who your teachers were?
Some of them, but I don't remember all of them.
When you think of those teachers, was there any of them that tried to be kind at all?
In the later years when I was in high school, they were nice to me, but not when elementary. They were well. There was one teacher, Sister Denise Helen. She was very nice. She was a teacher in grade 2.
What kind of martial law did you have to put up with? Like, did they, like so many children, did you experience the ruler or the pointer? How did they treat you in the class?
Ruler and a strap in front of everybody, so everybody could see you cry.
So they
Is
loved
that
the
what you
public.
mean?
They liked to publicly humiliate you.
Yeah, in front of everybody. And another thing too, when I used to get humiliated was, okay, the girls were separate. There was about 60 of us, and the boys were separate. They had a separate side of the building,
Right.
and I used to pee my bed. I used to wet my bed, and I had no control over it. So what they used to do to me to humiliate me was they would come and pull my blankets off early in the morning, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, and just if my bed was wet, they would just whip me and make me walk to the bathroom with all my wet blankets. And that carried on through right till I was a teenager. And they didn't take me to a hospital or nothing, but that was the biggest thing. And the other kids used to laugh at me. And that's what the nuns, that's the worst thing that I kept. But now, let it go.
How long was it before you were able to go home? Were you able to go home for holidays to see your parents at all?
Not till, not till grade 4 or 5.
So you were separated from your family for 4 years before you were able to see them again, other than the children that were in residential school but you couldn't talk to.
Yeah.
Were you aware of the beatings and the sexual abuse that was going on with some of the children in your school?
I saw lots of children get beaten for nothing. And I didn't know anything about sexuality. And there was times when some girls would be taken out of our classroom or out of the bedroom, out of our dormitory, and we never saw them again. And then there was some girls that were kept upstairs in the dormitory all the time instead of going to school, and they weren't even sick. So we didn't know what was going on, and that lady was from Sucker Creek, and she never ever told me why they were there, why she was kept upstairs.
What do you think in your heart made those nuns so mean?
First of all, I feel, or kind of figured it out. I believe some of those nuns were men, and they just wore
Wore the habit but were actually men.
That's what I think. Now that I think of them, and I don't think of them, but what I remember of them, how masculine they were, and little whiskers. Because I was there for 11 years, but I got adapted to their way of life so I wouldn't be beaten.
When you say adapted, what was your typical day like?
I went to church. I went to church every morning. I prayed all day. I would go in the chapel and pray instead of playing. I would follow rules. I would do what they said, just so I don't get.
And then, when you got to finally leave residential school, how did your life change?
I took my grade 12. I took my grade 12 in High Prairie, but I went day school from my mom and dad's house. I went to grade 12 in High Prairie, and then I carried on school. I moved to Edmonton and went to school, finished, did my business education.
And what did you do later on in life for a bit? Like, what kind of work did you choose to do?
Social work.
And the reason why you chose social work?
To help you tractor because of all my abuse. And to I went through so much through all my life, and I'm a survivor. And I went back. Second time I went to school, I became a social worker, and then I did social work practice all these years. I retired 2 years ago.
When did you start picking up your culture again?
When I left the mission. When I left the mission.
You've been about 17 years old when you started learning your culture again?
Yeah, 19.
19.
When I came back home.
And in your social work, did you help young Indigenous people connect to their culture?
I went to Sweats and I lived the culture life. Yes. I helped my nieces. So I prayed with them and I went to ceremonies with them. When they were teenagers, they're still practicing it, living it, not practicing it, living it.
How is your prayer different today than it was in residential school?
I pray from my heart, and I pray to the Creator and all our spirit guides and our ancestors, and I pray from my heart.
So you don't pray in the Roman Catholic faith?
No, I say the Our Father, because my mother used to say the Our Father in Cree, and that's a forgiveness prayer. So I always say it every day. My mother used to say the Our Father and the Hail Mary in Cree and all her other prayers, but she was a devoted Catholic.
How are they able to forgive and move on and still practice that same faith? Do you know?
Well, I don't, well, I believe they carried on because in Sacred Creek, there's a lot, well, at that time, everybody believed in the Catholic Church. So I believe when they left the mission, they carried on with their Catholic religion because they did not practice or live the culture way. As for our family, our father, my dad carried on, and my grandfather and my kukum, my my grandfather's wife, Sophie, was also a medicine lady for the people. So we lived like that from childhood. And then there was a break when we went to the mission. And then when I came back, I carried on.
So you went right back into your own culture. And today, you're how old now?
I am 74. I will be 75 in November.
And today you're a pipe carrier.
Yes.
And you are a strong advocate of telling the stories of the truth, of helping others learn.
Yes.
When you look at your grandchildren, do you see for the Indigenous culture?
There's, okay, I had one grandson and he was right connected to the earth. He passed away 2 years ago. But he was connected right, I raised him so he was connected right to the earth in our culture. But my other three grandchildren, I don't spend much time with them, but they're adults now and they come to ceremonies when we have ceremonies, but I never thought of talking to them about it, but they respect it and they honor it. But I have other nieces and nephews that are strongly connected to the culture, and I'm always there to be with them. I walk with them, or they walk with me.
So when we look at the future, what you see is people walking hand in hand, helping each other to stay in the culture.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about the culture, a lot of non-Indigenous people don't truly understand what that means. So help us understand what living in the culture really means. Take us through a regular day and how you live in your culture.
It's a way of life, and it's believing who you are, being happy, joyful. You you respect everything, even the little bugs. You live in respect, and you honor your parents and other people, and you kind. You be grateful for what you have and show gratitude, gratefulness, humbleness, and you just take it as it is.
You use a lot of ceremony at home. Smudging.
Smudging, praying. We got a little kids who smudge and they go like this, they smudge.
When we think about the smudge, it's a ceremony all of its own. It's
Yes.
a personal ceremony.
Yes, it's a cleansing.
Can you explain to those that have never understood smudge or been exposed to it how it works? So why do you bring the smudge, the smoke? Why do you bring it to your mouth? Why do you bring it to your eyes? Why do you bring it to your ears? What's the symbolism?
The symbolism is okay. We get the smudges. There's different kind of smudges. We Cree people like fungus. Well, we use all of them. So what we do is we use these plants to smudge because they're connected to the Earth Mother and all of nature. So this is what we do to cleanse all the negativity. And we come from our forehead, okay? Cleanse our thoughts, cleanse our eyes, cleanse our mouth, our ears, all over. It's a cleansing. And to give you and to help you walk in dignity and in connection with the Earth Mother and all our ancestors, our nature, the sky. So that's what I explain to them. It's a cleansing.
You're actually reconnecting to your own authenticity through that particular ceremony, correct?
Yes.
It's all about shedding your bad habits,
Negativity.
and taking in the good and staying connected to yourself.
With your heart.
Yes.
But this comes first, tobacco.
Tobacco is such an important part of ceremony and laying down your intention to do good, correct?
Yeah. And it comes first. It leads the way. you don't have tobacco, nothing goes right.
Things. Can you tell people why tobacco is so important?
All I tell them is it leads the way. But my father never used to pray without tobacco.
So
So that
tobacco,
was part of our culture.
tobacco helps to take your prayer, your intention to the Creator.
Yeah.
So
And that's why you put it in the fire.
So the smoke lifts that intention up. When you're placing a tobacco tie or laying tobacco into the fire, do you say any special prayer? How do you tell the Creator what you're asking for?
I talk to him, just like I talk to you. And I walk around the fire. I don't have to be walked, but I put tobacco in the 4 directions and in the middle for to reach to the Creator and all our spirit guides. I always go in a circle. I start from the north and then I start from the east and finish in the north. And that's how the tobacco leads my way.
I've learned that there were two kinds of children in residential school: survivors and those that fought the system. And those that fought the system ended up oftentimes not coming home.
Yes.
But white children who've never experienced that, who were not educated that these things were happening, have a really hard time understanding that a child could not come home from school. Did you experience the loss of other children in your school?
Okay. I was one of those that followed through and pray and everything.
You adapted.
But there was children that used to fight the system. And some of them would be taken away, and that was it. We never knew where they went. I never knew where they went.
And they just disappeared.
And that was in Jusard.
And they just disappeared.
And they just disappeared during classroom times. They would come and ask them to go out, call them out of the classroom, and they would get. There was times when they never came back, and this was in elementary that this was happening, and we didn't know where they went. But as guy, well, I followed rules. I did whatever. I prayed all day long. Even my classmates would call me Sister Emma. But I just followed through. I seen so much. But I just learned to adapt to their rules and abuse. And they even used to tell me that they knew about my dad. And they used to tell me that my dad worked for the devil.
And who did your dad work for?
Huh?
And who did your dad work for?
He lived for himself, and he was who he is.
His father, Moostoos' son,
Alexander.
What happened to him that your father ended up living with Moostoos instead of Alexander?
Because my Moostoos went and got him from the mission. It was Alexander that put him in the mission. So Moostoos went and got him and trained.
And what happened with the relationship between his son Alexander and Moostoos?
Nothing.
Alexander was happy that he brought your father home?
Yeah. In fact, when us guys were little, my mom and dad used to keep my kukum and mushroom, Alexander and Sophie. My grandmother was blind, so people had to take their children had to take care of them. And I remember that my Muslim Alexander was living with us. He had his own cabin, but
It was all in the same area.
in the same homestead.
Your clan are very largely people of the lake.
Yeah.
What are the traditional ways of getting food? Like, is fishing a big thing? Like, tell people what your culture would have looked like back in 1930, 1940, when it comes to living on the land. How did you forage a lot? Tell us how that happened in your family.
Okay. My dad was a hunter. And a trapper, and he lived in the like lived off the land. And I remember when my dad and people lived all along the lake, and in Sucker Creek we used to live on the other. Well, my grandparents used to live right by the lake over here. My Alexander and Sophie used to live across the creek on the other side of the lake. They used to live in drift pile and all along the lake. All these people lived and they moved and they lived and they moved along and they lived. Some of them lived in drift pile. My dad said they were living in drift pile when they had 2 children, and then they moved to Sucker Creek with my grandfather, and they had land over there, and they all lived around the lake.
And so hunting was plentiful then. A lot of moose in this area, a lot of deer.
Everything, rabbits. There used to be lots of everything, prairie chickens, rabbits, ducks. Nobody went hungry. My dad was a great hunter, and I remember, I remember when we were little, we would all go. He would be delivering moose meat and everything in a wagon, and we'd all be going with him, and we'd be dropping off food, different tent or houses.
Yeah.
We no, we were very poor. Everybody was very poor in Sucker Creek, but everyone worked together. Everyone loved one another. There was no fighting, no nothing, and that's how we grew up
Until the schools.
until the school. And I remember all these old people that my mom and dad helped, aunties and uncles.
And in the First Nation tradition, if you adopt someone as an auntie or an uncle or a brother, you don't have to adopt them legally. You just adopt them into your family and they become an auntie or an uncle.
Yeah. You accept them from your heart.
Unlike Western culture, white man's culture, your connection to family and your belief in raising other people's children as your own is very unique in this world. Tell the people that are going to watch this video why looking after others as if they were your own is so important.
Truly, I helped raise one of my nephews ever since he was 2 weeks old. I started babysitting him, and he ended up wanting to live with me, so he stayed with me till he was 20 years old. But to me, he was like my child. And he just, there's no ifs and buts or whatever. It's all love. And then I raised my grandchildren because daughter couldn't do it. And they were like my children. But we saw that, I saw that in my growing up. When my brothers went to the mission and they came home, they were 16. They brought home some kids that were orphans from the mission, and those boys lived with us, my mom and dad's, until they were married. So it's something that I lived through.
So basically, if I'm to understand this right, any human that's lost, that's looking for love, if they connected with you, you just adopted them and they became your family and you just moved on and kept helping them and working with them and loving them.
Yes.
That's an unusual trait for any culture. And I think maybe it's the reason why, in spite of so much oppression, your culture still stands, is because you have that compassion and that love.
And that's how we were raised. And we never judged, we just accepted people into our family. And I'm still like that.
I think as a person who's related to someone who signed the treaty, is there any family knowledge of when Moostoos and Kiniseo and Felix Giroux signed the treaty? What was their intent for that treaty?
From my understanding, they thought that their living conditions would improve, but they didn't know that they were going to be losing their ways of life.
The residential school was never ever part of the discussion for signing of Treaty 8.
No. Not according to what I read and what my dad used to say. And this is why my Chief Moostoos went and got my dad out of there, because it wasn't in the deal.
What do you think is the most important thing for a young person to learn?
To learn where they came from, their history, their family, and the way people used to live in Sucker Creek before this. In my time, it was a beautiful place to live. Like I said, everybody loved everybody. Everybody helped everybody.
When did that change?
It changed when all the alcohol, because there was no alcohol. Treaty people were not allowed to go and purchase alcohol. No, not even to go to the bars or nothing. And when alcohol became open, that's when everything changed. People from here used to go to walk all the way to a High Prairie to go buy alcohol. That's when it all changed, and then different families went different ways.
Do you think this was intentional?
Yes, that was their intention, to destroy all of us. And that was the intention of the residential school, to kill the spirit. And it did happen. I mean, we didn't get killed, but some people did. Some children did. So that was their intention right from the beginning. You know, before I went to residential school, and there was about 5 of us left that didn't start school, right? Mm-hmm. And when somebody would, and my dad was a farmer, and he used to work with lots of white people in the area, trade, work for food or whatever. And when somebody would come down the road, my mom would grab, and we had a big cellar because we always had big gardens. My mom and dad always had big gardens. When somebody would come down the road, my mom would say, Munia, walk, and she would just grab the cellar, and all of us had to go and hide in the cellar, and we had to stay in the cellar until the white people went left.
And that's because she was scared they were going to come take you.
Yes, because my mother didn't know how to speak English either, nor my dad. They learned from us after we went to school. And this is why all of us had a hard time and still are don't like white people, although it's not the ones that hurt us, but it was just a general idea. White people, they're here to hurt us. That's what happened in our house. And sometimes I still have a hard time to understand. I don't even want to understand. Like, I just avoid it. But that's what happened to our family. But I don't know how the other family is. But okay, the fear is gone. I have lots of friends that are different nationalities, and they're just like me. I had a sister that was 2 years older than me, and she passed away when she was 6 months old. So there was a gap there between my brother Fred and me for 4 years. And after my sister died, she was 6 months old. I was born 2 years later. So I was spoiled by everyone. I was, I remember I always had long hair and would sing, sit there and sing everywhere. And I was so spoiled by my siblings. And I had so much pride, self-esteem, and there was nothing in the world that mattered until they took me to the mission. I quit singing. I even have pictures. My sister had pictures of me singing. I was always singing, making up my own songs. I regained some of my confidence after residential school and meeting other people.
Is there one elder in your past that holds a special place in your heart? It's not family, but an elder from your community that helped you?
Yes.
Who is that person?
He's not from the community, but he did come and join me here. His name is Gary Nolt Vistahaya, Big Grizzly. I journeyed with him for about 5 years. He was a great medicine man, and then I worked with a medicine man from uh, Buck Lake. His name was Raven. He was well known in the province, and that's where I got my name from.
And your name is?
Raven Woman. Actually, and then I had a second name at the same ceremony, Red Tail Hawk Woman.
And why were you gifted two names?
I don't know, because at that ceremony there was some people that wanted a name, and at that time these people were crying because they didn't get their name. And I said to the elders, the two elders, I said, I got two names. Give one name to one. And That's how naive I was. But anyway, they said, "Oh no, that's your name. We can't give your name to someone else." But I traveled with those people for a long time, and that's where I got my pipe from. I had to work hard to get it, training.
Tell us a little bit about the pipe and the pipe ceremony. That is something that a lot of people have no understanding of.
Okay, the pipe. The pipe is the connection to
Creator.
Creator and all our ancestors. All our ancestors are always with us. And then you go through the directions, the four directions, and the tobacco, of course. And then you pray, you ask the Creator to connect you for the people, to connect all of us. And we pray to the Creator to ask for direction, guidance, help, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and we're all equal. No one is better than me or you, or we're all equal. And this is, and then we smoke the pipe. We go the four directions, and we make a pray at each direction. And then we smoke it, and we walk around. Four rounds, because there's four directions, four seasons, four life cycles, for everything. And then everybody, and the fourth round, even if your pipe is out, usually it works the four rounds. It depends on the group. We put the pipe down and we make offerings. And the pipe, the stem is a resemblance of the male. The bowl is a resemblance of the womb, the mother, the woman. And the male and female make a pipe to go around the universe, Earth, the universe. And there's lots of beliefs on how to respect your pipe and how to respect yourself. And there's lots of choices you have to make to walk with your pipe.
And your pipe is your connection to Creator.
Oh yeah. I'm happy to share that. I really am. And that's my way of life. And I became a sweat lodge maker during my training. I was gone with my teachers for a while.
And a sweat lodge is about purifying your body and your
Yeah,
soul, correct?
yeah. On rocks and tobacco and water. I love sweats. I used to do them all the time when I came back. But to me, ceremonies are my life. It lifts me up. It brings my spirit up. I'm not any better than anybody, but that's where I find my love and joy.
Very
And
much.
the top of, look, our fire went up. They're there. Can I put some tobacco there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I enjoyed my interview, and I'm so happy that you listened. And I'm wearing my shawl today because this was my brother's last gift to me. My brother Russell was a medicine man and a healer ever since he was little, and he went to the other world 2018. This was the last thing he gave me, so this is very special, and I wear it to special ceremonies, celebrations. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing.
And I was a survivor when I was in my 30s. At that time, there was cancer was a deadly thing, and there was no cure or nothing. And I had breast cancer, and there was quite a few of us in the community at the time, and all of them passed away. I was the only survivor. And this was before I started that path. So I know that was my purpose.
And so now you're going to offer tobacco.
Yes. This I have to hang up. Thank you, Creator, all our spirit guides, for letting this happen. Help us carry on our teachings and her way of life to all the young generations, people that are interested. The West is the tender beings. Thank you, tender beings. Please help us go through this project in a productive way where we can be successful, bringing back our history for all our generations.